I got a little bit extra curious about the experiential like marketing. I haven't heard that word before, um, but I guess it's like everything from like events to bigger, like huge concerts, like I read on your site. But maybe you can just explain it instead.
Yeah, I think the term has become more common in the last, I would say, 5 years, calling it experiential marketing. Because before it was kind of viewed with other marketing components. You know how like when someone's hiring for a director of marketing and you look at the description and it's enough for like 6 different jobs. I think that they being just the marketing community, finally carved it out to call it what it actually is. And the way I look at it is by calling it anytime you want a consumer to experience your brand in real life, whatever that may be, that is a form of experiential marketing. Because they're experiencing it, whether it's a dinner or whether it's a free sample at a restaurant or a store or a bar, a concert they may go to, whatever it may be, they're experiencing your brand in a way that you planned for them to experience it. So you can kind of build it to be exactly what you want. Like you want them to receive it in this way, or you want them to uncover it in a certain way. And you have a little more control than just some of the more traditional marketing methods of, let's say you're a spirits brand and you send point of sale items to a bar or restaurant. You don't really have much control over, like, did they even use it? Did they use it properly? How did that person visiting their establishment experience it? Whereas when it's true activation style marketing, you can control it from kind of start to finish.
Ah, I see, I see. And how could it look like for a brand? Like obviously you've probably done many different events here, and different experience.
Mhm.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like how it could look like for a typical brand? Can any brand do it, or is it more for, I guess you mentioned like spirits and beverages, that idea, or yeah, tell me a little bit more about that.
Any brand can do it. It really depends on if it's right for your brand and if you have the right KPIs for it, because like I said, it's an experience. So if there's not a really good way for someone to experience your product, for lack of a better way to put it, it may not be right for your brand. Spirits brands and things that are based around consumption are a lot easier,
Yeah.
because there's just so many more options out there. Companies like, let's say, an Airbnb, they do a lot of experiential marketing. They sponsor things like the Olympics and the Paralympics and the winter and summer, and they do a lot of experiences around helping the different countries and their teams find homes. And then they do homes, they're like fan houses and things like that. You know, to more tangible, less consumption based, can figure it out. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Emily in Paris. I feel like
Yes.
everyone's seen
My
it.
step, yeah, my stepmom loves it, so yeah.
Yeah, I think it can be a little cheesy, but that show as well kind of does a good job of introducing it, because while they say they do traditional marketing, a lot of the things that Emily does are events. They did the big dinner for the McLaren car in the lavender fields, and they did the very guerrilla style fashion week show for the one designer in Versailles. And I think that's a good example that most people have seen, and they may not know that's what they were watching.
Yeah, that's true. And if you think of, obviously there's different type of experience you can, execute, but let's say Coachella or one of those dinners you mentioned, if you're a brand, you're thinking like, okay, let's execute it, let's go for it. Like, what are the things they need to think about? What type of resources do they need? Like, do you have like not the whole recipe of how to kind of execute and do it,
Mhm.
but what should you plan? What are the steps? Could you share a little bit about that? What you should think about?
Yeah,
If you want to do it.
absolutely. It's a lot more intense than people realize. There's a lot of dedicated agencies now to experiential marketing than there were before. And those agencies are fully stacked internally with creative departments and production departments that not only design and do like 3D renders and models of what you might be building or planning, but then they also, have to fabricate it and bring all the things to life and use the logistics to get it to your location. And then you've got like your sales and client services people, who are the people we normally think about the most, that work directly with the clients to kind of plan the things. So if you have the resources and the budget to use an agency, I would normally recommend that approach, just because they're the experts. And bringing that many people in-house to do it can be super daunting. But you can also have someone in-house that kind of leads the charge, and then you hire out vendors or freelancers and contractors. It's a really big contract business as well. The experiential marketing, especially in the production world, most people who work experiential production are solopreneurs or work for themselves. But I would definitely say aligning on how much money you have to spend is very important, because it can get very expensive. You can go as big or as small as you want. I've done really large scale events I've done music festivals that are 70, 80,000 people. And then I've also done dinners for 22 people, and they've been equally as impactful when you approach it in the right way, like knowing your KPIs, knowing what you want each person you're inviting or selling a ticket to experience. And you have to get really granular and organized, but you can do it either way.
Yeah. And how should you plan for this? Like, what's the timeline here? Like, how long does everything take?
The smaller scale side, so dinners and smaller events that may be like up to 50 people, I think is a good scale. You can do those, I would say, maybe in 2 to 3 months. Really, securing a venue is the big question mark. That depending on how coveted of a venue you want to use, that can book anywhere from 6 months to a year sometimes. But on the larger scale side, when you're fabricating things, or if you're building a stage, or there's a lot of moving pieces to it, you get into, needing a permit in the city and the county that you are operating in, and needing alcohol licenses and things like that can take 90 to 120 days. So in a perfect world, you'll give it at least 6 months of planning.
Yeah. And what would you, if you think of those type of huge events, why should a brand do it themselves like that instead of just sponsoring already like a Coachella or whatever? What would you say is the difference there, and just sampling your beverage or whatever product you have? Like, what would you say is the difference between that and just doing everything yourself, and like inviting the people?
Would definitely recommend the sponsorship route. And even when you go that route, you're still looking at those same timelines, because the people that are producing the actual event, they still have all those same deadlines and needs for permits and things like that. So however you're integrating, you still should give it 6 months at least. For example, the events around Coachella, in April, we start planning that in August, I think, is when we really get started. And we had just wrapped up at the end of June with all the financials from the year before. So it's kind of a year-round situation that it's turned into. But I definitely like the sponsorship route, because it allows you to get a piece of the puzzle without being responsible for all of it. And then you're integrating with a lot of other brands. You're working with agencies and production crews that are super experienced. And then you can also put off a lot of the, I'm going to say a lot of the legwork, but the event will also be doing its own PR and its own marketing. And then you can get involved in that on top of what you do in-house. So it really just opens up a lot of doors.
And if you go this marketing route, is it the same if I would, let's say, contact 10 influencers and just buy their tickets and send them to Coachella? and they just talk about us. Is that also experiential, like marketing, or
I
but
would
that
say
sounds
so.
cheaper in a way. Or what's your experience around that?
Yeah, so it definitely is cheaper to do it that way. It's just it's all on the sliding scale. So let's say you want to send 10 influencers to Coachella. You'll, rent a house, you'll pay for their flights, you will buy their tickets, schedule them some lunches and dinners, get them invited to some of like the after parties or ancillary events. And that cost is definitely more fixed. Um, I just lost my complete train of thought. But as far as the return you're looking at, you kind of have a cap on it because you have those 10 influencers sharing about your brand. And that may check off your KPIs, like if those are the only impressions and reach that you're looking to go for, then that's perfect. Or going the other route, sponsoring, let's say, one of the events at Zinyara, that's one of the most popular Coachella after parties, 3,000 people come, something like that. Your KPIs are going to go a lot farther because you're going to have probably a massive PR program. If I use the spirits example, if you're a spirits brand, you're going to have however many drinks that is in a night, because it will be like your tequila and you're the tequila sponsor. Any drink ordered with tequila is going to be in your cup with your napkin, with your liquor inside. It just goes a lot farther. So it just depends on what you're looking to accomplish.
Yeah. What would you say if you're gonna do this? What are good KPIs to look at? Like good KPI, like what should you expect if you're gonna do this as a brand? Obviously, I don't know if sales is your goal. The goal? Is this even a good channel to go for, or what are the KPIs that you would recommend to kind of focus on? Yeah.
Sales, that's a really good question. Sales is a tough one as a KPI in this industry because it's so focused on getting your name in front of a consumer, whether they have heard of you or not. So you're not really selling anything because you're kind of giving it to them to experience in a small or large way. So if your KPIs are sales, there are ways to do it. A company I used to work for, they did a big activation with Adidas at Coachella, the year that Bad Bunny was one of the headliners. And he did a shoe collaboration with Adidas. And they dropped the shoe at the activation where you could buy it. And it had like almost 100% sell-through rate. It was super successful, but you have to really take it from a sales perspective, which in my opinion, I wouldn't really recommend for experiential because it's really about how many people experience the brand. And that can be tough to quantify, but then you kind of work in your marketing teams and you look at, okay, how many impressions did we get from sponsoring this event? Like social listening, pulling all of those metrics. How many posts did people, whether they tagged us or not, how many Patron logos, if, for example, were in the background of a photo from all of our photo moments that we sponsored at this event? Or how many times did we see the Airbnb logo when people were walking into the house and taking their Instagram stories or things like that? So a lot of marketing metrics become very important as far as posting online, comments, engagement, and tags.
And I feel like after this type of event or marketing, there's a lot of opportunity too, like stuff you can reuse and just do a lot of things afterwards. What are the examples here? Like what can you do after a huge event or yeah?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things you can do after, especially if you're, let's say, like a stage sponsor at a festival, or the stage has digital advertising and in between the acts, they run some ads. Things like that are really easy to integrate into a PR campaign because then you take the images and the content generated from those spots, you put them in PR campaigns, and next thing you know, you have 15 billion impressions because you got that out on Forbes and BizBash and Newsweek and Business Insider. And then people take it from there. Then people are sharing those articles on different social channels. It goes viral on LinkedIn. I think the PR arm is a really big one.
Yeah, yeah. And now I was thinking like everything with events, like I've done it myself too, and I think many people have experience from it. It's very stressful and it's hard to like coordinate everything. What would you say based on now your experience? What are the not risks but the challenges that you always need to think about? Like this always kind of happen or could happen, like that is good for brands to just be aware of? Or do you have like a list of things that this always happen? Like just know this, yeah.
Yes, so there's two sides to this answer. In the experiential side, weather is always the biggest one. You plan an event for 8 months in a place that has perfect weather, like a friend of mine did last year here in the desert where it never rains. It certainly doesn't snow. And it did both of those things that day. It was literally the only day it snowed in the desert in like the last 10 years. So weather is definitely the biggest one. Having a rain plan that's always far less glamorous than whatever you were planning to do outside, but having it in place is super important, and it can be expensive because you have to also plan for how you're going to outfit the inside of a room while also doing the outside. And a lot of people want to cut corners there, but as soon as it starts raining, you regret that. Things like a generator or power outage. I had one last year where my generator got shot as soon as the performer started performing. So the whole stage went dark. And that's something you can't really plan for because we had a backup. So we easily switched the power, but it took 15 minutes, and that's tough. People who paid a lot of money for a table at your event, but it's now dead silent and there's no lights. Things like just acts of nature. But from the influencer side, the things to watch out for that are just always tough, and anyone who works with influencers knows this, that influencers are not always the most punctual, organized people. So if you're planning a dinner, like making sure you do an hour or 30 minutes of like a cocktail hour before to give everyone time to actually arrive before you seat them.
That's smart.
Yeah, learns the hard way with that one. Anytime you have a performing artist involved, I mean, if it's not their own tour, they're just notorious for not taking it as seriously. Like you have them show up an hour before and they show up 45 minutes late. So really just learning having a really good talent wrangler, whether it's influencers, performers, to stay on top of them and their moving pieces. Let's see, what else? On the influencer side too, just knowing that you can't always perfectly plan the content either that you expect from an event. So you may hire 10 people who the last 45 posts of theirs have been flawless, and you saw them go to an event and they had perfectly curated stories that put the brand in the best light. And, you can't guarantee that that's what you're going to get. You might get the total number of posts you're expecting, but they may not be the best quality. So just making sure that if that happens, you at least have enough people or to cycle in. Like you have some that, you can just chalk it up as a loss, but we have 8 other creators who did perfect, things like that. Or maybe someone on site that's helping them along the way, like, hey, make sure she sees it before you post it. I guess I should say they. Doesn't have to be a she.
Yeah.
Just like levels of quality control along the way, no matter what you're doing, is super important.
Yeah. Yeah. Now when you say it, like if it's like a Coachella concert, whatever, and it's drinks and stuff like that involved, obviously the shoots and the content can be different. Maybe not the highest quality because of that. But so I mean, I know you also mentioned another subject, which was like influencer rates. If we just think of influencer rates when it comes to this type of marketing, like if you send influencers to Coachella, what are the budgets usually? Like, obviously you pay everything for them, but then on top of that, you just pay the similar rates, or is it any different from a regular collab? where they just do the content, the typical influence marketing content, or yeah, what are the differences when it comes to like rates and budget?
Yeah, so it depends on the level of the creator or the talent that you're bringing, well, obviously, and I also think that I'm a little spoiled being on both sides because I'm very in the middle on this topic. Whereas influencer managers are very much like focused on getting the rate for their talent. Experiential producers are focused on staying in budget, and then I land somewhere very in the middle. But I always like to identify the value of what you're giving them before you get too deep in a rate discussion. So it's like, we're going to pay for their flight. We're going to pay for their tickets. We're going to pay for all their transportation, all of their food, all of their housing. And that has a value of X. And we're also asking for this package of content. It has a value of X. And I like to marry the two and see where we can balance from there. Obviously, if you have a more well-known talent that you're really banking on their name, image, and likeness, those types of creators are going to require all the things be paid and the fee paid and complete. They're not going to do much balance with you. But that's where I always start. I like to balance. Because it can get...
If they just, yeah, but I guess for some influencers, you can just send them for free, like as long as you just pay everything. But you mean like if they are credible, like if they're huge or for some reason a little bit cooler,
yeah,
you kind of just need to give them all, the regular rates plus everything paid.
And then there's the approach too with those same types of creators where they're like, I wouldn't be going to this if it wasn't for this job. So I'm not going to discount my package for these posts because you're paying for me to go. When you find those creators who are like, I'm dying to go to Coachella, I would love to go, you have a little more leeway in your negotiations. And I don't think it should be always completely for trade, because I think in my experience, a lot of the brands that send creators to Coachella that I've experienced, they very much require a lot of deliverables in exchange, and it typically doesn't always balance, but the creator really wants to go. So I'm like, okay, sorry, like you can go. But if they're getting $10,000 in value from the trip, but you're being asked for $25,000 worth of posts and deliverables, like there's somewhere in that $15,000 gap to land where they can be properly compensated, I think.
Yeah. Does it ever happen that, like, what are the bad examples? Have you any like bad examples of those type of experiences where did it go well, and do you know why, and so people can kind of avoid those type of collapse or mistakes?
I think you have to be really careful with who you choose. A lot of people have managers these days, but there's still a lot that don't. I think that some creators who are self-managed really get it and are very professional and very organized. But I think that's something that managers really bring to the table for creators who aren't as organized. They're very creative minds. Like, it's hard to put them in that box, but making sure you're selecting a professional creator, possibly with a manager who can help you manage the steps along the way. Because I have had some experiences where, the manager was kind of half in and half out, helped get the contract done, things like that. Definitely sent me the invoice very quickly. But the creator shows up, like, doesn't have any idea what time he's supposed to be anywhere. He's always late. Kind of doesn't get along well with the other influencers and questions everything. He's like, are you sure I'm contracted to do that? And it just really put a strain on the entire experience. Whereas other creators are like, oh yeah, like I have a screenshot on my phone. My manager sent me my itinerary. You sent me my itinerary. And he knows exactly what he's there to do, because he's there to have fun, but he was also there to do a job. So he was very professional the whole way, whereas the other creator was not.
I see. But that was also interesting. So how do you, if it's a experience where it's a group of people, how do you put together that group? Like you said, like if it's not a fit together, like do you just look for like friends, like influencers friends, or yeah, how do you set up a group if it's like a trip?
A lot of the times it's hoping for the best. Because the problem with doing people that are friends and that you know are in the same circle is you get a lot of overlap with the audience. And sometimes that's okay. But sometimes you want to diversify as much as possible with the people who are going to be consuming the content. So that's where that professionalism piece comes back into play. You're trying to pick people who really have a track record of understanding the job that they're signing up for, so they can come in and they may not like the other people, but they're like, we're here for 3 days. I'm here for a job. Like, not everyone loves their coworkers. You've definitely sat next to someone before at a desk that you couldn't stand, and you can't just be mean to them. You can't just cause problems in the workplace. And I think that more people should see the influencer industry and experiential industry as what it is. It's a real industry, and it's a very legitimate line of work. It's not someone on Wall Street in finance. It's different in its own way, but the more people start to see it as a professional, real industry, the better everyone's going to be.
Yeah, for sure. And as a final kind of point, like any other advice that you usually give to brands that want to start this experience marketing?
I think that my advice is anyone that does influencer marketing should be doing experiential marketing in some way, even if it's tiny. The two are more intertwined than I think people realize. And I think that brands are seeing on a day-to-day basis really big leaps and bounds by integrating the two together, rather than either not doing one and just doing the other, or keeping them completely separate.
Yeah.
If that makes
sense. I feel like, I know I had a talk with, we had a different episode before where we talked about like influence marketing within the omni-channel. Mm-hmm. So like use your influencers for other things too, not only at the classic type of post. And I guess this kind of includes in that too, like send them to this event or do this with them. I think that's a lot smarter, so you get most out of your influencer budget than just doing the classic ones that everybody's seen all the time.
Yeah, it's like a perfect hybrid of the traditional brand ambassador that you hire to kind of just really integrate with your brand every day of their life. Then you bring them into like some influencer campaigns, and then you start putting them in experiences. Like, even if your company does a conference, like for employees, like Red Bull, for example, does a lot of really great conferences for their employees every year. Like, bringing those people to maybe do a speaker session at that conference and integrating them in that way, it builds like a really good sense of community between all these different arms of marketing, to where they can all continue on the same storyline, rather than just being these separate departments that all come to 4 meetings a year together and share their results, and they have no idea what the other one's doing.
Yeah.
They can really work together, and when you can do that, you're going to see really great results.
Yeah. But great. Let's hope that this episode will hopefully inspire a lot of people or brands to do more of this. But thanks for joining and sharing all this insights about experiential.
Thanks for having me and asking all the good questions.